What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Project Boro podcast. And we've not waited very long. We're here straight away off the bat to discuss the big news amongst Middlesbrough Football Club, the most unpredictable piece of news that not one of us saw coming at all. Rob Edwards is the next Middlesbrough head coach, manager, whatever you want to call it. Today, we're here to talk about it all. We're going to discuss our thoughts on the appointment, of course, discussing the thoughts of the fan base, which I think is a big discussion in itself. We're going to chat through the pros, the cons, as well as the style of play we think he will implement at Boro and whether we think it will work or not work with Boro's current squad. But I guess the worst kept secret, alongside Castor being Boro's next kit manufacturer, is out the door and out in the open for everyone. So, Rob Edwards, we've touched upon this already. We touched upon this in the last podcast because I guess we said, didn't we? We saw it coming. We kind of knew where things were going, unless there was a left field option that caught us off guard completely, which never looked like it was going to happen. But Rob Edwards is officially the Boro head coach off the back of a difficult season at Luton Town. Last season, he got them relegated, of course, played a part in getting them relegated from the Championship. But prior to that, did have them competitive in the Premier League. They were unfortunate, I think, to get relegated, and I don't think that's something that should be held against him. And prior to that, he had two outstanding promotions, getting Forest Green into League One, who are, that was a huge achievement in itself when you see where they're at as a club and their overall stature. And he did a similar job at Luton Town, getting them to the Premier League the season after. There was a Watford spell sandwiched in between that as well, which was sort of by the by. But where do you stand, Chris, on Rob Edwards' appointment? Are you wanting to, throw your digital season ticket at Steve Gibson next time you're at the Riverside? Are you ready to give it all up, or is there a part of you that's actually excited by this?
Well, in the last pod, both of us said we wanted Danny Röhl. Both of us felt we weren't going to get Danny Röhl, and we both predicted that Rob Edwards would be the new manager. So, fast forward 2 weeks, and Rob Edwards is the new manager. That's not because we're in the know or anything, but if any of you are listening who want to, who are in the know, who want us to be in the know, then going forward, then yeah, please get in touch. But yeah, it just felt telegraphed to me, didn't it? It was like, I don't think Steve Cooper was ever really interested in taking the job. I know Jim White on TalkSport ruled him out pretty quickly, didn't he? And said, it would be a polite no if he was offered the job. So I don't think Steve Cooper was ever really in the running for the job. And then when, the local media are saying that the final three are Rob Edwards, Steve Cooper, Danny Röhl, straight away you think, well, you can rule Steve Cooper out, barring, us making some unbelievable offer to him to win him round. And you got Danny Röhl. He was my preference, but personally, I never believed we were serious about bringing him in. We discussed previously in the last pod, didn't we? The Steve Gibson filters when it comes to looking for a new manager. British, out of work. Unfortunately, once you apply those filters, Danny Röhl does not appear on the search. And then you got the small matter of his release fee, or his release clause. Was it 2 million? Was it 4 million? I've heard figures as high as 7 million. And then I've heard people say, championship clubs can get it at a discount rate. And then other people say, no, that's for relegated Premier League clubs in the championship. So that was a bit of a mess. But the bottom line is Steve Gibson does not target out of managers who are currently in work and pay compensation. He never has. And I don't know why, but it's just something that he's never done. He's always looked for managers who are out of work, and unless you're Aitor Karanka, British. So it was a fairly safe bet that Rob Edwards would be the new manager. So my personal thoughts are it's a boring appointment. It was predictable and it's not particularly exciting, but it's fine. I'm not going to get, too excited or too sort of down about it. I didn't have any strong opinions when Michael Carrick came in. I remember when I was on BBC T's on the fans panel and I was asked about it, my response was meh, because I didn't really know what to think about him. And I kind of feel the same about Edwards, where the stuff there for us to be positive about, the stuff there for us to be, ooh, maybe some red flags there, but yeah, ultimately, it's what he does when he's at this football club that matters. So I don't think it's going to set anyone's pulses racing. It's not going to get anyone sprinting down to the ticket office to buy a ticket. But I'll do the same as I did when Kite was appointed. I will judge him on his results, his performances, and give him time to implement the way that he wants to play.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If I was to say I believed he was the best candidate the club could find, I'd be lying, quite frankly. And if I was to tell myself that there were no better options, if the club truly scouted, all of Europe, Rob Edwards was always the best option. I don't believe that for a second, and it is, as you say, predictable. And I think because it's been telegraphed for so long, that hasn't helped. That's sort of built up I wouldn't even say apathy. I think it's worse than that amongst the fan base. I think it's, the reaction's been crazy, which we'll dip into in a bit. But for me personally, I've said for a while, it was never going to be an appointment that would inspire me or excite me. But I do think that the negative reaction to his appointment has been way too over the top. And as I said in the last podcast we did, we are a playoff challenger. Since relegation, we have averaged 8th in the league. We have no divine right to demand any manager, never mind, turn our nose up at a manager who's had 2 promotions. Yes, the counter argument will be relegations, and I know that's been thrown around a lot, but there is absolutely no shame in getting Luton Town relegated from the Premier League. There is no shame in that whatsoever. You should really flip that into how good was it that he got them there in the first place? And the argument to that I've seen as well, it was Nathan Jones' squad. It wasn't his squad.
Yeah.
It wasn't. That's an even better thing then, because he's took someone else's squad and he's walked through the door mid-season, got the most out of that squad and took them up to another level. And he exceeded expectations, as he did at Forest Green as well, and got them promoted. So I think the reaction is an overreaction. I think he's had 8 bad months as a manager. His Watford spell was indifferent. And I know it was a relegation. Well, it was a recently relegated Premier League side with parachute payments and riches. And he had a very good squad there, but he was let go after 11 games. I think there were 9 points off the playoffs or something. So things weren't going great, but it's Watford. I don't think you can judge many managers off of how they get sacked from Watford, to be honest with you. So for me, he deserves immense credit for everything he did up until 12 months ago. And I think prior to 12 months ago, this would have been a very, very good appointment, I would say. And let's not forget, he was the alternative option, we believe, when Carrick was originally appointed. It was him or it was Edwards. The club have clearly thought, well, maybe we've gone down the wrong route. Maybe it was, as we believe, as was rumoured, Gibson wanted Carrick, Scott wanted Edwards. Maybe Gibson's went, right, I had my way, it hasn't worked. Yeah, it's on the block, Kieran. This is on you. You wanted a new head coach. You're there to football. Go for who you want. And I see where the frustration comes from there, because it does feel like it was always going to be Rob Edwards because of the fact he was interviewed before. He's got a close relationship with Kieran Scott. That, jobs for the boys. I get why people are throwing that argument at the club, but if there's someone there that they know they'll work with and they know will be, and people say yes man. I mean, who's to say he'll be a yes man? If you work well with people, then the whole thing should operate better. So I've got no problem with him being picked because he has a good relationship. I'd rather pick someone who has a good relationship with the head of football than someone who absolutely despises him. You know what I mean? So, yeah, he's had a bad 8 months. And the big skepticism is, of course, whether he can get over that. And I would have thought he'd have been better in a more less pressure job to get himself back on track. I think throwing himself straight into the Boro job in the position we're in is a big gamble. And I can't lie, it could go completely either way. I feel like we are still on a knife edge. This isn't a reassuring appointment that has me sat there comfortable saying, yep, next season's going to be good. I genuinely do still worry that this could go absolutely either way. It could go disastrously and the fans could turn quick and he could be gone by December and Boro could be bottom half, God forbid, near the drop zone. Equally, he could do what he did at Luton. He could hit the ground running with a squad that works with how he plays, and we might be all massively, massively surprised. So, yeah, it's as you say, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. And I think the overreaction is crazy. Yeah, he's had a bad spell, but he's got 2 great promotions on his CV, and they count for something. But in terms of the reaction of the fan base, I don't know about you. I've never, and this could be recency bias, I don't know. I don't remember an appointment being as divisive as this. I've never seen an appointment get as much stick as what this one has. How much of it is justified, do you think? Do you think frustrations are more to those above? Where do you think we stand, and where do you think things are with the fan base? Does it put him under pressure? Is it unfair? What do you think of how the overall fan base has reacted to this?
I think the only appointment that I can recall that's been less well received, obviously Pulis wasn't. I don't think it was. There's not much fanfare there, but Jonathan Woodgate is the only one I can think of that was more divisive than this one. I think the problem that Rob Edwards is going to have is that if you looked at any of the polls that were online, I know people say sample size or whatever, but you take all the polls I've seen online, they're very, very, very similar. You had maybe 75% of fans wanting Danny Role. You had 20% wanting Steve Cooper. Then you had around 5% wanting Rob Edwards. And that's going to be the problem there. That out of the 3 that it was down to, he was the club's number 1 pick and he was the fans' number 3 pick. So straight away there, the fans sort of, there's questions there. As you've said, the relationship with Kieran Scott, many fans won't see that as a positive. Many will see it as a negative. The old jobs for the boys thing that we trotted out, yeah. But oddly enough, the same people who were saying jobs for the boys were, delighted at the talk of Aaron Danks coming back to be manager. And you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, wouldn't that be jobs for the boys giving an old coach who knows the club a job? And then, I've seen people using all sorts of fake stats and trying to use it against him. Like, he's got 2 relegations on the bounce. You're thinking, what, really? He got Luton promoted and then they got relegated. There was no expectation of them getting, surviving in the Premier League. So I don't know why people are using that against him. The relegation with Luton, well, he left them 2 points outside the drop zone. I know many Luton fans will say Bloomfield took over and he couldn't stop the rot that had set under Edwards, which I think is, that's fine, but I think it's a bit disingenuous to say back-to-back relegations or anything like that. I think that's a bit of a lazy argument. You've then got another section of fans who are still firmly trapped in the cult of personality of Michael Carrick, who just nothing was his fault. He was badly done by. He was thrown under the bus. It's ironic that I say cult of personality because when he was at the club, he never showed as much of his personality. He was very guarded in press conferences. He didn't give it. He was very didn't give anything away on the touchline. Showed little emotion there. He was prickly in his post-match press conferences. I don't think he showed us enough of the real Michael Carrick. So, and they're still arguing now on Twitter. They'll be arguing right now as we record this thing about, it's the fans' fault, it's the players' fault, it's Kieran Scott's fault, it's Steve Gibson's fault, it's Mark Drury's fault, fine margins, you name it, and they're still. And I just don't see the point in relitigating these arguments that we were having in February or May. It's one of those where I think people just need to let it go and just get over it. It's like he's gone. This isn't one of those instances where it's like, a TV show's got rid of your favourite character and you're lobbying to bring them back. And, if the people in charge see enough people want them back, they'll bring them back. It's not how it works. They're not going to suddenly Steve Gibbs is not going to wake up tomorrow and say, oh, you know what, I made a mistake, we'll bring Michael Carrick back. it's not going to happen. So I don't see the point in continuing the argument about it. There's a lot of the grass isn't greener. Oh, you fans who question Carrick have, you've got what you deserve, and blah, blah. I'm just thinking, if it was a manager like Mark Robbins at Coventry, who won the AFL trophy, guided them to 2 promotions in 4 seasons, got them in the Championship playoff final, semi-finals of an FA Cup, dealing with all the off-the-field issues, I could understand why he's got a massive amount of credit in the bank, and the fans would love to get rid of him, and the grass isn't green and all that stuff. But they did, and they then moved on to better things at the end of last season under Frank Lampard. So I don't understand this thing of we've gone backwards in 2 seasons, and people thinking that that's our ceiling now. We can't expect to do any better than that. Finishing below Bristol City and Blackburn and Millwall. How dare you expect to get any better than that? So, and I just think there's a section of fans who are just waiting for this to go wrong now, so they can say, "I told you so. We should have got rid of Carrick." But it's one of those for me where I do think ultimately in the end it was right to part ways with Michael Carrick, because I just didn't see where we were improving. I didn't see where he was learning. I didn't see where we were adapting. I didn't see enough influencing games on the touchline from him. So I think it was the right decision. That doesn't necessarily mean that Rob Edwards is the correct appointment. He wouldn't be my first choice, but I don't think it's a terrible choice, and I don't know what revolutionary, visionary manager people were expecting us to hire. I saw one guy being vox popped in Middlesbrough Town Centre, and his suggestion was Jurgen Klopp. I thought he was, maybe just having a bit of joking at first, but having seen some of the reactions to Rob Edwards, I start to think, is that who people expect? Is that the caliber of manager that people expected us to get? Because I understand people wanted someone a bit more exciting, but I've spoke to various Boro fans over the last 2 weeks, and I've spoke to people who turn their nose up Steve Cooper, so he's got 2 player finishes with Swansea, took Forest from bottom of the league to promotion in the Championship, kept them in there, did a half decent job at Leicester. I've seen people turn their nose up at Danny Role, who for me is one of the best young coaches in the Championship. People turn their nose up at Rob Edwards. I just kind of think, what manager were you expecting us to hire? Because as it is, we are a mid-table Championship club who our aim should always be to get in the playoffs. But, if you can't attract the likes of Steve Cooper, what managers are you expecting us to attract? So, yeah, I say I'm going to keep an open mind on Edwards. I hope that once the appointment's made, people have the whinges and the moans, but after that, just give him a chance, see what happens. I have my own reservations about it, but until we see what happens in the transfer window and what squad we put together, then it's going to be very hard to make any judgment on him as to whether it's the right appointment or not. So that's all I would say, is that fans need to, everyone has an opinion, everyone's a moan and a groan, but when it comes down to it, you get behind the bloke, because whether we like it or not, he is the Middlesbrough manager, and we want and need him to be a success.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. I don't subscribe to the idea that I've seen it's a downgrade on Michael Carrick. Talking like Michael Carrick achieved unbelievable things at Boro. He didn't achieve anything. We had a playoff finish in the first couple of months, and everything since then was regression. And to pair him up and Rob Edwards' appointment, they're two completely different things. So the idea that it's the Carrick out brigade's fault if Edwards goes wrong, they're 2 completely different things. They are not related in the slightest. We, in my opinion, needed a new manager. This is the new manager. I agree. I don't know what fans were expecting. I think it's clear Cooper was never going to take the job. Would it have been a job he'd have taken 5 or 6 years ago? Maybe it's maybe it's the realization to some fans as to where we are as a club now. You know, that these big names that we maybe could attract previously, we can't attract anymore. And Danny Roll, huge compensation fee, would have took up a huge chunk of our transfer kitty, I'd imagine. And you know, there's quotes out there to suggest that he wants to go back to Germany, if anywhere. So there's a number of options, and yet could we have plucked an unknown out of Europe? Yeah, maybe, but that it would have been exciting because there was more of an unknown there. But that could equally have gone massively, massively wrong than an appointment that maybe is a tad safe. Yeah, maybe it's safe, maybe it isn't exciting, but I think the club know exactly what they're going to get with Rob Edwards. They've spoken to him before. They've come up against his teams. They've competed with his teams. The people at the club know him, so I don't begrudge them for opting to go with him. And I think it is just a case of, can he get over the last 8 months? Because 8 bad months does not make him a downgrade on Michael Carrick. It doesn't. Is it a giant leap forward? I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say it isn't. But you know, what manager would we have brought in to warrant it being a giant leap forward? I don't know. I really don't know who that manager would have been. So yeah, it's I do hope that because it has been telegraphed for so long, it's kept the conversation going. It's probably riled fans up more and more slowly, but surely once it's announced and it's done, people can have a moan, say what they want, and then we all need to move on, because exactly, he's the Middlesbrough manager. We have to back him, and we have to put the faith and trust that the decision makers have made the right decision. And I think ultimately, if things don't go well, I think it's probably more down to them than it is Rob Edwards, to be honest with you. I think when he left Luton in the manner that he did, if he would have been told then that he'd get the Borough job in 8 months' time, he'd have absolutely, you know, he'd have snapped your hand off. So I don't think, you know, it's a job he would ever turn down, and I don't blame him for that. So I think it's all on the decision makers at the club. I think it is a massive. It's going to be a massive judgment of Kieran Scott. I think now this maybe is the biggest decision he's had to make in his role, but yeah. 100%. We've got to back him. We simply have to. We are not going to be successful if the fan base is against the manager before he's even managed a game. We're divided. It's just pointless. It's not going to achieve anything, because as you perfectly put, you can't change it. So we have to just get together, back him, and hope that we could be pleasantly surprised. I mean, Regis Lebris coming to Sunderland a year ago off the back of a relegation in France. And you know what I mean? It's just, you just can't say for sure what might happen if the right head coach with the right squad in the right environment all comes together. So let's just wait and see. So we'll split it into two, because I guess, you know, as we've both said, there are pros, there are cons. We can't pretend that there aren't. But what parts of this appointment particularly maybe do excite you or inspire you or do give you a degree of optimism going into next season? What is it that you've maybe seen from Rob Edwards and his teams in the past that give you reason to be positive going into next season?
Well, obviously look at his promotions, 2 promotions on his CV. One of those being from League 2 to League 1 with Forest Green. The other one, obviously more well known, when he took over Luton. People will go Nathan Jones's team, but they were 10th when he took over. Got them to 3rd. Obviously eventually beat Coventry. You know, we as Borough fans keep looking back with gooey eyes, you know, lovingly back at, you know, Tuba, Archer, Ramsey that season. Rob Edwards navigated a Luton Town team, which on paper was a lot weaker than that Borough team, guided them through the playoffs that season. So that's a big positive for me, for him.
Yeah.
He's done the very thing that we're desperate to do. He's guided the team that wasn't fancied, that didn't have parachute payments, and he's got them through the playoffs on one of the smaller budgets in the league. You know, it's probably, I'd say, lower mid-table budget-wise. So that's a big positive there, that, you know, he's not someone that we're going to have to throw money at. When they did get in the Premier League, they certainly didn't disgrace themselves, you know, like Sheffield United have a couple of times, or other teams have. You know, they finished 18, 6 points off survival. Very respectable. He's a manager who obviously wants to win, but when I've listened to his interviews, he speaks openly about how he wants his side to entertain the fans, to give them a team to be proud of. And I can say as a Boro fan, the second half of last season, there wasn't many times when I was proud of the team, because there were times when I didn't think they were given or appear to be giving the required effort. So if he can give us that, an entertaining team that, we can be proud of, then yeah, big positive there. Again, listening to him, he talks about his teams having a high intensity, high work rate, all stuff the fans like to see. He sometimes, he quite often likes to play with two strikers, something that, old school fans especially, like to see two strikers. So that will get some fans on side if we see that. He's coached at England under 16 level, so he's got a reputation for nurturing emerging players, and that sort of thing. So on that side of things, he does tick a lot of boxes. And again, importantly for a lot of fans, he is not a rookie manager. How many times have we appointed rookies over the years? And we've said, we've seen basic things in the pitch as fans. You're thinking, why isn't he doing this? Why is he doing that? And people said, oh, no, it's his first year in the job. He's learning on the job, blah, blah, blah. Rob Edwards is not a rookie. He took over as Wolves interim in 2016, and he's been coaching ever since. So he's got experience as well. So even though he's quite a young manager, he's still got quite a bit of experience. So there are quite a few things there to be positive about. I'm sure we'll go into the tactical side later, but for me, I like seeing a team. My preferred formation for a team like us would be like a variation of a 3-5-2 with wing backs, because I think it's adaptable. When you're playing the teams who you feel you maybe shouldn't be beating, you can push those wing backs high up the pitch. When you're playing teams, I don't know, you went to Leeds away or Man City away or whoever, those wing backs can drop back and a bit more defensively solid. I really like that. And it was when we appointed Wilder. That was the one time where I thought, that we were going to do it, that we were going to potentially get promotion, because you saw us play Tottenham at home, you saw us play Man United away. That formation just so adaptable, and it just helps you get players in the right areas of the pitch. So the fact he plays at it's a slight variation on 3-5-2, but he plays the wing back, so I like that. Whereas with Carrick, I always felt the formation and the system that he was using, if we got into the Premier League by some minor miracle, would have been brutally exposed. And we saw Chelsea away. We saw it was at times. Though to be fair to him, Chelsea at home, I thought he was brilliant in that game, because he was adaptable. And I think we did actually use wing backs in that game.
Yeah, back three.
Yeah. Did. So yeah, I really like that way of setting teams up. So if we can get the players in to help them play that system, I see that's a big positive personally.
Yeah, that's a big one for me as well. I know we will look at the tactics a little bit later, but I was willing Boro to not all the time, not permanently, but switch to a back three at times under Michael Carrick, because some of our best performances I thought were in a three. I agree with you. I think it's an adaptable formation. You can switch it up, so it can make you more defensively sound. It can make you a tougher unit to break down. I felt like with the 4-3-2-1 that we had under Carrick, or the 4-2-3-1, we were very vulnerable, regardless of whether we were at home or away. I feel like, although adaptability is a question mark over Rob Edwards, I have wanted a Boro team to set up in a back three. And I've also cried out for us to have width, and the wing backs will give us that width. So everything that I've wanted a Boro team to do, I think we will get. No more bloody inverted wingers, no more cutting inside. Hopefully the wing backs are going to be getting chalk on the boots and putting balls in the box. And, I've never been a giant advocate for two up top, but hell, if it gives us a bigger goal threat up there, more of a, big man, little man, or a more physical striker alongside of Tommy Conway, I'm all for that as well. So, yeah, his style of play and the way he sets his teams up, I'm all for it. It's kind of what I've been wanting in a weird way. There are cons to that though, which we'll get onto in terms of I think how much the personnel would have to shift. I think for what he wants from his players, but I think the formation itself is really really good. And I also like him. I also just like him as a person. I think what we saw under Michael Carrick was Borough fans didn't really resonate to the kind of manager who was very dull, boring, very one note, didn't give much away. As you mentioned with Michael Carrick, he wasn't the sort of character that I think Borough fans could get behind and rally with on the touchline. I think
he was very media trained, wasn't he? Very media trained to not give anything away.
Yeah. So I think Borough as a club and the fans, and we saw it under Carrick because it was one of the biggest complaints fans had while he was here. I think fans will definitely resonate and react a lot better to a manager who is more open and, in Rob Edwards' case, very emotional. He's a very emotional guy. I think he wears his heart on his sleeve. I think in press conferences, in interviews, you'll get a lot out of him. He'll speak very openly. He's big on honesty. He's big on respect. So I think if things go well, I think he's got the personality that Borough fans will really, really like. And plus, some of the quotes we've seen from how he likes his teams to play, I think that's the sort of thing that Borough fans would get behind as well. A big criticism of Carrick's Borough was how lethargic we were at times, how ponderous we were, how slow we were. There were times where you wanted to shake the team, give them a boot up the backside because they were just so slow and as I said, lethargic and ponderous. But Edwards wants his teams to be bold, brave, aggressive. He wants them to press hard. He wants them to win the ball back quickly. He likes quick transitions. He likes to break quickly. I mean, dare I say, we might see some more counter-attacking football, which I love. So everything that he says, at least, I know it's all talk and we need to see it in action, and I hope he gets the players to help him, put that philosophy into action. But everything every which way he describes his teams, I really like, and that's how I would like a Borough team to be. The character of players that he talks of and his character is what I want at Borough. And plus, I really, really like the three at the back. I just, as you say, it is a little bit more adaptable, and I think would definitely suit us a lot more. Because if we're at home in a game we should win, we can push them wing backs up, we can dominate them, push them back into their half. If we're away to, I don't know, Ipswich, Southampton, Leicester next season, we can go there with more of a back five, hit them on the break. Could work. I think we will see different sides to a Borough side. Unlike when under Carrick, it was just play the same way. Doesn't matter if we're home, doesn't matter if we're away, bottom of the league, top of the league. Hopefully that will level out and we'll see more consistent results. But yeah, on paper, I like the guy a lot. I respect the guy a lot, and I'm quite up for his style of play as well. But cons.
Yes.
There are cons. We've spoke of his promotions. We've spoke of what he's done at Forest Green and Luton Town especially. But of course, there are cons to this appointment and reasons to be concerned, reasons to be cautious. So what, on the other hand, what of this appointment has got you a little bit sceptical, worried about what could happen?
So for me, there's three things. Firstly, it's the Luton relegation hangover. So they're relegated from the Premier League, and then it seems to have been since then that he just couldn't address the slide, whether it was just they're in the habit of losing from the Premier League or what have you. He just couldn't address the slide. When they're relegated, they lost their opening game 4-1 at home to Burnley. And in the opening four games, they lost four. Sorry, in the opening four games, they lost 3 and drew 1. They only won 3 of the opening 12 back in the Championship. So for a team who many said would go straight back up, that was not a very encouraging start. And it just seemed that he just couldn't stop the rot. Eventually, when he was sacked with them 2 points outside the bottom 3, having won just 7 games in 26, which again, for a club that was in the Premier League the previous season, wasn't great. Obviously, Matt Bloomfield took over and couldn't keep them up. They were eventually relegated. So yeah, that is a concern. This is someone who, for 2 seasons now, has been losing matches. It reminds me a bit of when we brought Morgan Whittaker into the team in January. You're thinking this is an out of form player who's been playing for an out of form club at Plymouth, and we're expecting him just to switch it and start playing great and us win games. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Everyone would be again. We'll come on to this later, I'm sure. Does our squad fit the Rob Edwards way of playing? Currently, for me, it's a bit of an emphatic no. I'm sure we'll get onto the finer points later on that, but for me, the squad needs a lot of work to be able to get this ready to play the way that Rob Edwards wants to play. And the other con for me is just the fan expectation and hostility to the appointment. One of the big things for getting rid of Michael Carrick was that he was only going to get till realistically October, and if things hadn't massively improved, then he was likely to be gone. So the idea behind Gibson making a very rare decision to change the manager in the summer, I think the thinking that would have been, well, we'll get a new man in, and then it's going to buy us some time. Then I just think with the fan reaction from it, he's not going to get much time. I think if he hits the ground running, he'd be fine. However, if we start slow, like we tend to as a club, then I think the doom mongers will be out very, very early for this one. So I think there's a lot of pressure on him to start well, and I think there's even more pressure on the recruitment team to make sure that we have a brilliant transfer window. They have to really smash it out the park and get him the players he needs, because if they don't, I can see this being a very hostile atmosphere at the Riverside for those opening games.
Yeah. The cons completely, come from the last 8 months for me. That's where they span from. As I alluded to earlier, I've got nothing that worries me at all prior to the start of last season. Forest Green, great. Watford, indifferent. Luton up until a year ago, fantastic. But it was clear last season when things were going wrong, they had months and months and months to address that slide and at least try and level things out, even if it meant getting them just steady in mid-table. I didn't ever expect there to be a ridiculous turnaround, but things just did not get better from that moment onwards. And a couple of reasons for that, from what I've seen, was down to a reluctance to maybe adapt his formation when things weren't working at times. That tactical rigidity, which makes Boro fans shudder a little bit, because that's what we sort of was one of our biggest complaints under Michael Carrick. So if things don't start working on the pitch from a tactical point of view, how quickly could he address that here without it then sliding out of control? Because, as you alluded to, he just sadly isn't going to start with much credit in the bank. And that's crazy to say that when it comes to a manager with 2 promotions, and a manager who navigated Luton through the same playoff 4 Michael Carrick couldn't get us through. It's crazy to think that he's going to come here with barely any credit in the bank, but the nature of the fan reaction is very much that. I think if we go 10 games and we only win 2 or 3, then I do worry that. And it doesn't, as I say, it doesn't even have to be directed at him specifically. I just think the overall feeling around the club and the feeling towards those higher will just turn a lot quicker than what it might have had we had a Danny Role or someone that the fans were a little bit more enamoured by. So I do worry that, the tactical side of things, if things don't start well, could be an issue. You alluded to it. The shift required within the squad and the personnel is big. That normally takes time. That normally will take a couple of games, maybe a couple of weeks, even months to adjust, to get the players up to speed. Will he get that time with the fans? I don't know. I think he certainly would with the owner and with Kieran Scott, but would he get that with the fans? I'm not sure. So I think the big concern for me is just how long it normally takes for a group of players in a club to switch their style up and their philosophy up as much as we might need to, with the turnover of squad as well. To get things moving quickly in the right direction is going to be difficult, and I just worry things could turn quickly. And then I guess the other side of his character, which you could flip as being a con. I spoke about him being a very emotional guy, heart on his sleeve, but there were also times last season where you could see at Luton he was struggling, and he looked devoid of ideas. He looked devoid of confidence. He didn't look like someone who was leading the team as much. He looked defeated at times towards the end, and there was some who said he actually wanted to leave after, ironically, we beat him 5-1 up here. And I remember his post-match presser after the game up at the Riverside. It did sound like an offer of resignation. So maybe that could have been avoided by Luton had they maybe got rid of him earlier, or maybe granted him the option to leave that maybe he wanted to earlier. So maybe a bit of that's on Luton as well. But I think would he have the mental strength to get through a tough spell at Boro and maybe get over a toxic fan reaction to bad form if things weren't to start well? So yeah, they are the cons and the worries I have. It's just, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I think if things felt a little bit more steady and stable, I wouldn't be as bothered. But because I just feel like the fan base and the club is still, even though we've got a new appointment and it should be fresh and it should feel new and exciting, I still think we're on such a knife edge at the minute. It could just go one way or the other very, very quickly. And I'm not too sure if tactically and also just emotionally he'd be able to stand up for that. He might have been able to stand up to that off the back of a Forest Green promotion or off the back of a Luton promotion. But as you say, the hangover from last season is one that I really, really hope he can get over and get over quickly. I was just going to say, I think what doesn't help, what you were saying, I think what doesn't help with the fans is our nearest and dearest rivals, Newcastle's success, Sunderland's success last season. I just think there's a section of our fan base now that are just impatient now. In their minds, they've waited long enough and they want to see progress and they want to see it now. So, yeah, it's one of those where he's just not going to give them the time, is he? And I think the fans would have been not very excited for Edwards anyway, but I think certainly, I mean, I'm sure you remember Twitter on the day that Sunderland got promoted, all those feelings just coming back to the surface, didn't they? So, yeah, I think that's played a major part in it, even though it probably shouldn't, because it's got nothing to do with us, really. No, I agree, but I mean, I get that completely, and I guess that's another potential con or reason to be skeptical is, I think we were at the time. I think we did approach a crossroads this summer where it was the right time to probably do something different. And I think that's another reason as to why the fans are maybe not as convinced by this, because it just feels like, it got spoke about a lot towards the end of last season, the cycle that Boro have been in for what feels like forever. Is it now? We're going into our 9th consecutive season in the Championship since we got relegated. In that time, we've been in the playoffs twice. Mm-hmm. Haven't mustered a goal in either. In one, we didn't even muster a shot on target. So, for all the expectations that Boro fans have, and I think they are warranted. With the price we pay to go to the games, the season ticket prices, the stature of the club, I think our expectations are realistic. And I think it is safe to say 9 years, 2 playoff campaigns where we've barely laid a glove on either of them is massively disappointing. And a reason as to why is that we have gone, round the houses and down the drains with managers. We've tried everything. We've tried the experienced head of Tony Pulis. I mean, Neil Warnock, granted, he was brought in more to save us from the Jonathan Woodgate experiment, which went drastically wrong. But even, he got us relatively close to the playoffs. You know, his record in 2021 under Warnock mirrors Carrick's record from last season, so it can't have been that disastrous. You know, we tried Gary Monk. We've thrown money at it. We went down the rookie manager route. We got Carrick. Wilder looked like the perfect balance. That probably would have worked eventually if he didn't start being a snake and looking at other jobs while he was here. So, you know, we've been around the cycle so much. And has it got anything to do with the nationality of the managers? I don't think so. I mean, I would like us to have done something more creative and imaginative. And, you know, I wouldn't say the state of British coaches or British coaching is the best at the moment. I think we might have had more luck looking outside the box. And I think Sunderland are an example, as that you mentioned, us looking at our, you know, closest rival. They've just had a foreign manager walk in, take them straight up, an unknown gaffer who's just worked wonders. So I think a part of it was that fans just felt like now was the time to maybe gamble and do something a bit different. And maybe because it's a safe option, maybe it's so similar to what, you know, the same sort of appointments that essentially have just kept us in the Championship for 9 years. I think the fact that we've stuck with a similar type of appointment, you mentioned the filters, the Gibson archetype. I think the fact that fans are both growing impatient and that this appointment doesn't, in some respects, look any different to what we've done in the past, that's added to the frustration because fans were just hoping for something completely different. And this seems like the safest option, the most obvious option. And I think fans will probably look at it and say, well, why is there reason to expect that this is going to be any different to Chris Wilder, Michael Carrick, Gary Monk, or anything? So I get that as well. You know, I 100% get why impatience. And I guess when you're impatient, the last thing you want to do is keep doing the same thing over and over again because you're just going to expect the same results. So I'd love Edwards to break the cycle. But
totally agree. I think if we'd have appointed Roberto Eduardo, the South American coach, I don't think we'd be having anywhere near this level of discourse about, you know, him being a bad appointment. But
especially and that would even be if Roberto Eduardo had just gotten his side relegated from the Argentinian First Division. Fans would still not have cared because he was Roberto Eduardo and it's exotic and it's different and it's refreshing. So I think even if the circumstances of what that manager had just gone through was the same as what Rob Edwards has just gone through, I think if he was just not British and just very, very different, that would have been enough for some fans. But Rob Edwards isn't, which, you know, it's not his fault, but he follows a long line of managers who have tried and failed to end the Boro curse. You alluded to this point on cons, and so did I, and I think a lot of other Championship pundits and fans online have alluded to this as well. The biggest reason as to why the Rob Edwards appointment was maybe a bit puzzling, but is also a bit of a bold gamble, is because what he requires from the team is massively different from what we've had. I mentioned it earlier, this Boro team and the players in it, whether it's their nature, whether it was how they were instructed, maybe they can, you know, surprise us and suddenly play in this different manner. But the very slow, possession-based, as I mentioned, ponderous type of football that we played under Michael Carrick at times, especially when it wasn't working. When it was in gear, it was great, but when it wasn't, it's very slow. And off the ball, we were very, very poor under Michael Carrick. That is going to change massively under Rob Edwards because, as we alluded to, he's massive on his team's counter-pressing, winning the ball back as soon as possible. High press, aggressive press, getting in the faces of the opposition and playing at a real intensity. That is the complete opposite of what we had under Michael Carrick, which was more focused on what we did on the ball, being slow but methodical, I would say, speeding up when needed, but off the ball especially, we were so bad at times under him. That's the biggest concern, and that's another massive, massive concern, to expect a squad of players who have played in such a manner for a long period to then switch it up and try and play the Rob Edwards way, which, there's a different formation. Granted, I think professional footballers should be able to adapt to any formation, but the style, the intensity that they're going to have to play with under Rob Edwards off the ball as well. It's a massive shift, isn't it? And it's one that's it's going to take a lot of work to implement, and that is a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, put aside all the stuff about, or let's look at his back-to-back relegations or his win ratio is not that great, even though they don't factor in he's been managing the Premier League for 38 games. This is the thing for me that is the concern about the appointment. That can our squad adapt to how he wants to play? Looking at it off the ball, he wants his front two, his wing backs, and his box-to-box midfielder to press high up the pitch, keep that ball in the opposition's box for as long as they can. It's going to be tough. On the ball, it's all sustain pressure, get the ball into the wing backs, and get the ball into the box. We haven't got anyone who's particularly good in the air. Lat would you think? As I'm reading this, thinking loads of energy in the final third, decent in the air. I think, oh yeah, he'd be great. Oh no,
but have been perfect,
didn't we? But then you look at the other end of the pitch. We are 100% going to need some new wing backs either side. I like Neto Borges. I think he did a really good job when he came in last season in that left-sided centre half in the centre back pairing. However, he's not a wing back. He's not suitable for Rob Edwards' way. I think he can play a left-sided centre half of the three, so we're okay there. I think he's demonstrated last season he can play that role quite comfortably. He's good on the ball. Ironically, at left back, you can probably guess what I'm going to say, but I think Ryan Giles would have been half decent in a Rob Edwards system. However, I am not for one moment advocating that we go back and sign Ryan Giles. But
Alfie Doughty. Sorry. Mate. Sorry.
Well, funny you should say that because I was going to say, ironically, it's not Ryan Giles. It's the guy who kept him out the team at Luton, Alfie Doughty, who is the man that I personally would love to see us go and sign.
He's perfect. Perfectly suited, yeah.
2 goals and 8 assists in 37 Premier League games. I'm surprised. I was surprised when he stayed there last season. I'd be very, very surprised if he stays and would have been in League One. For me, he'd be a quality addition. I'm hoping with the Rob Edwards connection, we can go and get him because that'd be a massive box tick there at left wing back. Because, I like Luke Ayling, and I think, maybe he could do a job at right-sided centre-half, perhaps, if he's filling in there, injury, suspension and all that. But he's not going to be able to play the right wing-back role in a Rob Edwards team. It's just, he doesn't have the legs anymore, doesn't have the pace anymore to do that. I think, Edwards, though, looking at it, from what I've seen, he always likes to play with a ball winner whose job is to basically tackle, get the ball and pass it along. Aidan Morris could do that in his sleep, so I don't have any issues with Aidan Morris there. I think he could do that fine. You got your 2 central midfielders, one likes to carry the ball, one he likes to give a bit more creative freedom to. Sadly, I don't think Hayden Hackney will be one of those players in that central midfield pair. Don't know, we'll see, but yeah, I think he's destined for better things, so we're going to have to get someone in there. Then you got your 2 forwards. I think Tommy Conway can play the sort of poacher role that Rob Edwards likes in his teams. You've got the 2 wing backs pushing hard at the pitch and they're slinging balls at the box from deep. You need someone who's good in the air, a Carlton Morris type player to play that role. We don't have that, so we are going to have to sign that. So I think there's quite a bit of work to do if we want to play the way that Rob Edwards likes to normally play. I think we need a goalkeeper. Though, from what I've seen of Edwards, there's not as much emphasis on playing out from the back as there was under Michael Carrick. So I don't, we might just be fine with someone who's comfortable shot stopping rather than someone who's great with his feet. I'd love Travers back, but I think he's going to get bigger and better offers than us, sadly.
Yeah.
We need a goalkeeper. We need at least 1 centre back with a bit of pace. We need a left wing back, a right wing back, replacement for Hackney. We need a target man. So I'd probably say we need 6 new players in the start 11. That's more than half a team. So That is my concern. That we're going to have a brilliant summer transfer window. There's some fans I think who were saying, "Oh, Rob Edwards and Michael Carrick are very similar," and I'm thinking, well, yeah, similar in the sense of the young English, and if they weren't involved in football, they'd be modelling next cardigans or jumpers maybe or something. But their styles are totally different, and that's where the concern comes in for me. That as you said there, we had under Carrick, it was quite off the ball. It was quite lethargic. Sometimes fans are thinking, are these players even, busting a gut for the cause and everything. Edwards, it's, let's say, aggressive, wants his team to press from the front, high press, high energy. I'm not convinced that many in this squad can play that way, though I may be pleasantly surprised. But there's certainly a lot of work there for Kieran Scott to do. And I hope that, well, I'm pretty sure he does know, having appointed is Rob Edwards, who, as we know, he is, I don't know if the best mates and go to the pub every week, but yeah, we know that there is a connection there with him. I'm pretty sure he knows how Rob Edwards wants to play. And I like to think that come the moment that he's appointed, he already has a list of targets that he's identified that can play the way he wants to play, and we're going to go and try and get those targets. Alfie Doughty, for example. And we're going to be ready to go for pre-season, because it is going to take a pre-season at least and a few games into the season for these players to adjust to play the way that Rob Edwards wants to play.
Yeah. And one positive note that come out of, I think it was an article I read, Dom from the Echo mentioned it. One of the reasons why we were especially impressed by Edwards was his knowledge of the squad and how he envisaged it working with how he plays football. So I think he's had a while out of work and he's had lots of time to properly scout and look at Boro's team, and hopefully he already has a great idea of what we need, and so does Kieran Scott, so they can get to work pretty quick. But yeah, I agree completely with what you said there. I mean, off the back of just the shift in approach off the ball, just changing so dramatically, there are positions in the team that you alluded to that definitely need work. I mean, we've got bodies in terms of quantity at centre back, but I think we just need to look at that area of the pitch for just reliability and availability for starters. I mean, if we're going to be playing 3 centre halves a game, then we're certainly going to need centre halves that are going to be a lot more reliable in terms of their fitness than the ones we've got now. I think if fit in an ideal world, I think you could have Vandenberg on the right, Fry in the middle as a sort of stopper, as a big solid centre back who doesn't move, doesn't shift too much. He is just there to nod and defend and do the basics of defending. I think he'd fit perfectly in the middle of a back three, and I think Vandenberg gives you balance on the right. He's good on the ball if he stays, of course. Borges, I think, is a ready-made left centre half. I'd rather him play there from what we've seen last season. Behind them, though, you've only really got Lenihan, who has been out for 18 months, 2 years. Who knows if he'll even ever get back to the player he once was. And then you've got George Edmondson, who I know we're not particularly enamoured by and isn't great on the ball either. And then, Luke Ayling, another one. Fitness questions. Could do a job at right centre half, I guess, but it wouldn't be someone I'd start in that position. No. Wing backs are a huge issue, though, of course. It's not only a big shift in how we want to play, in the fact that we didn't have any wing backs playing last season. It is ironic that Giles would probably have been better suited to that position, because we're only really going to have Bangura, who, again, exactly like Lenihan, is coming off the back of a long injury. It would be a big gamble to rely on him to just step into that role, bombing up and down the left-hand side, off the back of the injuries he's had. That's a concern. And we've pretty much got no one on the right-hand side, have we? We've got no one. We can't have Luke Ayling as a right wing back. He can't do that role anymore. Dykesteel's gone. So they are the two biggest areas in this team that I think we need to recruit well. I think Alfie Doughty would be perfect on the left. Absolutely perfect. Fantastic creator, great delivery, brilliant from assists as well. He's got really good delivery from assists, from set pieces. So from dead ball situations, I think he'll be really, really good. Maybe on the right-hand side, you look at Abali Mumba. possibly. A player from Plymouth, another one who, can bomb up and down the right-hand side. He's young, he's athletic. I think he could do a job at right wing back potentially. So they could be two wing backs we could look at. Agree with you completely on the centre of midfield. I think Morris is probably one of the few ready-made players to slot into a Rob Edwards system and style of play. We are going to have to somehow replace Hayden Hackney. Don't know how we do that. I don't, to be honest. Will he bring Lon McCabe in? He has got a reputation for, helping young players, bringing them in, developing them, which is good for us in our academy, I guess. But I think, you've got to still look at, even without Hayden Hackney, you're probably going to have to replace Johnny Howson. Still no word on a deal there. Dan Barlasser, I think he wasn't suited for Carrick's style of play. I think he's even further from being suited to Luton Town, from Rob Edwards' style of play, especially at Luton. So, yeah, centre midfield's a big issue. I think in terms of the 10, if he does play with a sort of a 3-4-1-2, yep, you've got Azaz. Hopefully, if he stays, he can slot in there. Maybe Whittaker might play there. There are some players in the team, though, like a McGree, a Bergzorg, whose position in the squad I do question now with the shift in system, but we've seen McGree play as a sort of 10 coming in off the left anyway, so maybe he can compete with Azaz or slot into that 10 position with Whittaker as well. And then, the two strikers, Conway's a shoo-in. He's a 20-goal a season striker for me, but we do need someone physical alongside him. I don't think he'd play Whittaker up top. Don't think he would Bergzorg either. And I don't think Force has the physicality that he'd probably want alongside Tommy Conway either. So I think we are going to have to look at a completely different forward. I've seen a few mention Josh Coburn, physicality, tall. I'm still not 100%.
Sub option, maybe?
Yeah. He certainly is more suited to what Edwards would want from a centre forward than what Carrick did. But I'm still not sure on Coburn. I wouldn't be against a Carlton Morris type of player, possibly alongside Conway. But we definitely need, as you mentioned and put really well, a poacher on one side and maybe a more, an aerial threat on the other. So, yeah, the work that needs doing, both just personnel to fill out the positions is massive, but to also get the players who are going to be able to play his way consecutively and consistently week to week. It's high intensity. And with our club's fitness record as well, playing at that level and that level of intensity every single week, it also worries me. And this is another thing that's just popped into my head as a red flag just now. With the level of intensity that we'd probably be playing off the ball, will that trigger the injuries to not only continue but be even worse? Was it I guess we'll find out. Was it an issue of Carrick's training methods? Is it a deeper issue with the medical staff, the sports scientists behind the scenes? If it is a deep-rooted issue at Boro and not how Michael Carrick had them training issue, if it is a club issue, I'm massively worried that just down to the level of intensity that the players will have to play at, off the ball, pressing, is it going to aggravate the injuries that are already bad enough? We can't afford for that to be anywhere near as bad as it already is. Never mind get worse. So that's another red flag. Will it make the injuries worse? So have you got anything else to mention on the squad before we finish off?
No, happy to move on.
Well, I guess the final thing to discuss then, rounding it all off, the pros, the cons, his style of play. Has this changed anything for you, and have your expectations adjusted in any way from, the final whistle at Coventry, going at next season, potentially with Michael Carrick? Has this appointment heightened your expectations? Has it actually lowered them a little bit? Or are you, essentially when it comes to your optimism, excitement and expectations for next season, has it done anything for you at all? Or are you just, where you were previously?
It's difficult to say, isn't it? It's really difficult because I was so deflated after Coventry. I wasn't even thinking of next season other than that. I could just see us having to make a change in October and start again. So in a way, I'm glad that we actually made a decision and we don't. It doesn't feel as inevitable as that. But I think it's incredibly difficult to talk about next season because there's just too many variables at the minute that we just don't know. there's already a narrative amongst some fans that if we don't get closer to the playoffs next season than we did this season just gone, then automatically it's a failure. For me, that's way, way, way too simplistic. We said all last season, didn't we, that the standard of the championship was abysmal, and it proved to be. It was one of the weakest leagues we've ever seen in the modern era. 68 points to get the playoff place. Poor, awful, and for us to finish below, the basket case that was Blackburn with the stuff going off the pitch, and Bristol City, who are nearly always mid-table, and below Millwall, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I didn't have any expectations going into next season. I just didn't know what to think really. So other than it's going to be a tougher league, and on paper it is anyway. When you look at it, you think you've got Leicester, Ipswich, Southampton coming down with parachute payments. You've got Sheffield United, still have parachute payments. Obviously, they made a change of manager. You got Birmingham and Wrexham coming up as with deeper pockets than your average League One newly promoted team. They're a bit of an unknown, but they've got a lot of momentum behind them. So we don't know what they could do. You've got the usual suspects in Norwich, West Brom, Coventry, Watford. So on paper, it's a much tougher league next season. I honestly can't judge where it's going to go next season at the moment, because I think recruitment will make or break Rob Edwards' tenure here. Because as we've discussed, this squad is not built to play Rob Edwards' style of football. So he's either going to have we as a club are either going to have a brilliant summer window, or he's going to have to be really adaptable. And some of these players are going to have to adapt to the way he wants to play. Because at the minute, there's too many in this squad who simply won't be able to play the high energy style he wants to play. So I think until we see some signings coming in through the door, we start seeing what rival squads look like. We start seeing, are we going to keep hold of Hackney? We're going to keep hold of Rav van den Berg? We're going to keep hold of Finn Azaz? I think it's very difficult to judge where I see us being next season. My expectations are always the minimum should be that we are challenging for the playoffs. So I think last season, given the state of the league, I think my expectations were we should finish in the playoffs, not necessarily get promoted, but it was finish in the playoffs. Didn't do that. So this season coming, I think, as it stands, I think if we, as we're going through this big reboot and change of style, I would like to see, as a minimum, we challenge for the playoffs, but that might change the closer we get to the big kickoff here. Might change my mind. So, well, actually, I think we've recruited really well here, and some of these teams around us aren't as strong as I thought they're going to be. So, I think we should get in the playoffs, but don't know. So, at the minute, it's hard to say. But yeah, I think once we see some signs coming in, once we see the way the team's shaping up, I think we can make a better decision at the minute. But yeah, difficult to make expectations at the minute.
Yeah, I can't wait for our season preview, and you're predicting us to win the league by 10 points and be Centurions, 100 points. Rob Edwards' sexy Centurion Reds. Nothing's changed for me. Part of me would love to actually have maybe my excitement and expectations have been really boosted, because I wanted a new manager, and we essentially got what we wanted, but yeah, there are just too many things around the appointment and too many things that need to change and need to work that does have me tempering my expectations. As I've said once or twice, it doesn't feel like that stable next step, that evolution that I was hoping for. I mentioned it a lot last season. I wanted Boro to, pause at Michael Carrick, bring someone in who could take us to that next step. I don't think that this is quite that. I don't think it is someone who can take us to that next step. I think it's maybe someone who can just keep us where we are, but do it in a different way. For now, anyway. And for that reason, I thought if we kept Carrick with, as you said, what should be a tougher league, I was expecting at best 10th again, maybe even 12th, maybe just smack bang in the middle of the league. And I'm not expecting too much different from that at the minute. I will always want us to be challenging for the playoffs, as you say. That's a minimum, but it will be very tough next season. A lot of things will have to go our way, I feel, for that to happen. So I do hope that the regression that we were seeing under Michael Carrick is at least halted, and Edwards can just keep us where we are and maybe take us a step forward. I think any step forward under him in this first season would be a real positive for me. I'm not expecting anything ridiculous like us going up by the playoffs, but yeah, as you say, it will massively hinge on recruitment and what happens around us. And naturally, being football fans and Boro fans, we fall through the trap every single season as it gets closer to the start of the season, and we've seen the odd couple of wins in pre-season. Oh, he looks a good signing. We end up getting our hopes up and thinking we're going to do this and that, and we inevitably never do. And I said this on X the other day, actually. Maybe it's actually a good thing that this season, instead of doing what we always do, which is going to every season with over-heightened expectations to which we are let down every single season, maybe it's actually better that we approach this one differently and go in with completely tempered, flawed expectations, expecting maybe the worst, and then we can only be pleasantly surprised, and maybe we'll come out of this season actually going, you know what? That was actually better than I thought. And we aren't massively disappointed and deflated as we are every single season. So maybe flipping the typical Boro reverse psychology might enable us to actually have a better season if we expect absolutely nothing from it. So
it's always better to under promise and over deliver than the reverse. So I totally agree. Maybe the no expectations or sort of low expectations, if you will, might work in our favour.
Yeah, fingers crossed it does, hopefully. But we'll leave it there. There are our first thoughts on Rob Edwards' appointment. Of course, if more interesting stuff comes out from, presses, interviews or whatever in the coming weeks, we can jump back on and discuss anything that we think is worth talking about. I guess the next podcast that we'll probably bring might be the eve of the season, after pre-season, and after we've made some signings to make a more solid prediction on where we think Boro will be and previewing the season itself. So we might come back for that, most likely at some point in July. But if anything pops up, as I say, in between now and then, we'll that we think's worth talking about, we'll jump on and talk about that in the meantime. But thank you for jumping on once again, Chris. We've already done 2 more podcasts than what we expected this summer, so at least the Boro have kept us busy. But as always, if you've enjoyed the podcast, do smash a like on the video. You can listen to this over on your podcast provider as well. There'll be a link in the description where you can hop onto Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, and you can listen to this on the go if you prefer, which might be easier. But if not, and you're watching on the YouTube channel, do subscribe for more. And of course, comment below with your thoughts and whether you think this is a good appointment, a bad appointment, indifferent, with your pros and cons as to Rob Edwards as the next Boro head coach. But until then, do take care, everyone. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you all in the next one.